What's up, gamers? Matt with That's Fair Podcasting. And today I'm going to talk about the Saints Row franchise, a franchise created all the way back in 2006 by THQ and Volition. They launched it back in 2006, the first Saints Row, which would ultimately go on to sell over 2 million copies over its lifetime and spawn even more sequels for the next 7 years. There would be 4 in all Saints Row titles. And even 2022, a not so good Saints Row reboot that would, to me, prove that what they started was awesome. So what goes up inevitably comes down. Again, thank you for joining me. If you don't mind taking the time, maybe subscribe to That's Fair Podcasting. Maybe like the video to help us in that algorithm, give us more views. Keep helping us grow. You guys have been awesome. Thank you so much. And if you've just joined me to watch the video, that's more than enough for me. I sincerely appreciate it. But I want to talk about the rise and fall of Saints Row. Let's start with 2006 when THQ and Volition released the very first Saints Row. I remember this GTA spoof coming in, and it was actually, I had a blast with it. I had, you meeting Johnny Gat, how he's bragging right away when you're being jumped into the gang. It took me less time. It was awesome. You had Johnny Gat, you had Julius, your 3rd Street Saints leader, which kind of met his demise in the second one. And then you had Lynn with the West Side Rollers. I actually liked Lynn's character. She was a badass, I believe voiced by Tia Carrera even. But the first Saints Row really opened up a new series. You had all these awesome side quests like Snatch, the Chop Shop, even that insurance fraud where that started out. And I believe the gangs were the West Side Rollers previously mentioned with Lynn. You had the Los Carnales, even though it's not the Los Carnales, since Los is the pointed out in the game as well. And then you had the Vice Kings. And I just remember this was a groundbreaking game to me, even though it kind of reminded me of some other previously made games along those lines. I think that THQ and Volition really started off something in this series, and I had such a great time with it. And then in 2008, Saints Row 2 would launch. And to me, the best of the series. I remember literally playing, I don't know how many hours of the co-op. We would do the system link together, me and my wife, both being the boss, if you will. And this would go on to actually sell like 3.5 million copies. And it really upgraded from the first one. I mean, it pretty much did the same thing the first one did, but the vehicle customization was deeper. You got to really deepen the customization of the boss. And then you have a face-off with Julius, if you remember. A lot of hidden things in Saints Row 2, but Stillwater, that city was awesome. You had the 3 gangs. My favorite was the Ronin. You had the Brotherhood, and then you had the Sons of Samdi. And it had a better storyline than I think the first one did. Much deeper. I liked being able to go around Stillwater, purchasing the different bases, customizing it, making it the purple that the Saints Row are. And I really, truly thought that, it was the best of the series. Then you would have in 2011, you would have Saints Row or Saints the Third. It would end up selling, I think, the highest amount of any of the games of the series sold at 5.5 million copies. And it introduced different characters such, Saints Row 2 introduced Shaundi and Pierce. You had a deep story with Johnny Gat and Aisha. And then Saints the Third, you had different ones like Kinsey and Viola being introduced. The downside to me was I didn't care for the animation and the way that the direction they went with the graphics versus the second one. I felt that it felt a little too linear for my taste. You did have gangs there, the Deckers, I think the Morning Stars, and I can't remember the last one. But anyway, I didn't really care for that game. Like I said, the gameplay mechanics didn't really hit me very well, and I didn't care for the graphics. But in 2013, Saints 4 came out. And it sold, even though it's still technically undisclosed to this day, maybe 2 million copies. If you remember that game, you start off basically as a president of the United States, even though you're the boss in Saints Row, the 3rd Street Saints. And ultimately, you get invaded by an alien who's led by Zinyak? I want to say Zinyak. But anyway, and you have to enter the simulator in order to figure out how to stop him, and you develop these different powers. It really did veer away from the Saints vibe that I got, but what's ironic is it took me a while to warm up to Saints Row 4, but I liked it better than Saints Row 3. I got used to the superpowers, the leaping the buildings, the gliding across the city. It literally made cars obsolete, so there's really no reason to bother with cars. But I did like too how it literally gave you different types of missions, you know, from the previous installments of like your insurance fraud and remember, I forgot what it was called, but there was in the second one you got to ride around as a cop and you had the cameraman going, there's another episode of Fuzz, you know, and it was just Saints Row 2 is nostalgic. It's obviously my favorite. But ultimately, back to Saints 4, it really did open up a different category as far as what the Saints Row franchise previously brought. It even had, I think, a Mass Effect spoof where you got to choose your lover towards the end before you had the big final battle. And I think they were kind of digging at Mass Effect because, you know, Commander Shepard, we'll bang. But, you know, it was pretty awesome. And then, you know, in 2013, THQ went defunct. All that was left was Volition. I think it was, they even had a different name for it. Like, I don't remember, something Silver Volition, or I don't remember, but we'll just call it Volition. They decided to do a Saints Row reboot in 2022, and that just surpassed 1.5 million copies sold. I think 1.7 to almost be more precise, which is abysmal because they needed a win and they gave you a woke piece of shit. Those who have watched me this far realize that I am anti-woke, at least in my video games. I've tolerated it in television shows and movies, but when your main escape is video games and they have pushed that progressive shit in your only escape, this is our way of venting, so screw it. But it brought us to Santo Ileso, I believe was the city. The city was impressive. It was more of a southwestern, like almost an Arizona style city. It was impressive. The graphics were solid, but let's be honest, you're struggling broke college students trying to find a way to take over the city, and you're not really bringing what the original Saints Row brought as far as your thug, you know, your you know, at all costs get it done. This one was more of a we're going to gently take over Santo Ileso, however. But anyway, it undersold, underwhelmingly bad, and it ultimately put Volition, they had to close their door in 2023 as well, because a reboot on a badass franchise was just no bueno. Again, THQ was defunct in 2013 and Volition in 2023. In my opinion, in 2006, when Volition ultimately put out Saints Row, in the beginning, it was a well-crafted fun fest of a badass franchise that they could have did so much more with. So much wasted potential. And I think it started wasting at Saints the Third, and then obviously in the fourth, which is a very unpopular game, even though I enjoyed it better than the third, and then this shit reboot. I guess in short, I'm kind of disappointed that Volition didn't ultimately give you something better, because they could have made this... Could it have compared to GTA? No, but I think it would have been a nice alternate game to play and allow us, because I think that, you know, I think I speak for a lot of people here. If some company could pick up Saints Row 2 and remaster it to more of today's mechanics with an Unreal Engine 5 with the customization they got, I think that could put Saints Row back on the map. But I don't, you know, obviously it's not going to help a Volition and a THQ. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening to this rant. Ultimately, I just wanted to let people know that I have a deep love for the first two Saints Rows. The rest, I haven't played nearly as much. But, you know, again, guys, if you stuck with me this long in this video, thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate it. It means the world to me that you watched the video. please feel free to subscribe to That's Fair Podcasting. Really help us grow. Thank you to the newest subscribers that have jumped on. I sincerely appreciate it. We're small, but we're growing. I appreciate it. Like the video for that algorithmic help. It kind of gives us more views. Again, if you just didn't do any of that, you stuck with me this long, thank you so much. And who knows, maybe the future could hold a remaster of Saints Row 2, but that's just being too hopeful, I think. Anyway, to you gamers, all love, and I am outro.